Mike Benz weigh in on why the European leaders. So Trump goes to meet Putin in Alaska bilaterally, but this is a multilateral meeting here in D.C. with Zelensky. Who are they backing? Mike, whose side are the European, Keir Starmer, Macron, and Maloney? What are they there for?
Well, they're there for the European donor set, the hedge funds, the private equity funds, the alternative asset managers, who all have billions of dollars of investments in Ukraine and Eurasia. They are very squarely on Team Zelensky here and have been since well before the 2022 affair popped off. The issue that Trump is running into is that Ukraine is losing on the battlefield, and there's no real way to stop the bleeding in terms of land loss other than peace. But they don't want peace on Putin's terms. They don't want to have to concede land in the Donbass. They don't want to have to concede Crimea. Really, this is all downstream of the unfortunate decision of the Obama administration to overthrow Ukraine's democratically elected government in 2014. And this is now 11 years into this. But what did the foreign policy establishment expect? When you topple a government in a coup, and then half of the country does not want to respect the new coup government, you either have to rule by totalitarian force and bloodshed, which is what was done between 2014 and 2022. Ukraine's military killed about 35,000 people in eastern Ukraine with U.S. weapons and Canadian and UK special forces on the ground. And Russia stepped in, and they've now declared some of this land theirs, including especially Crimea. But Europe wants to stop Trump from agreeing to a peace deal that includes giving up that land. And Trump is in a very difficult place because what can he really offer Putin? All he can really offer is his word that the U.S. will not back Ukraine being folded into NATO, that the U.S. will not breach the terms of the ceasefire. But what good is that really worth when behind Trump
Mike,
is an American foreign
this,
policy
and this is
establishment?
important. There's a really important discussion I want to have with you. We're going to hold you over for the break for the second block, and very extremely important. We heard from Witkoff over the weekend on the Sunday shows. I want to ask you about it. But do you get the sense, Trump 1.0, Trump in 2016 to 2020, he couldn't stand NATO. He didn't like anything about him. They didn't like him. And now this is a different Trump-NATO relationship. Are we at risk? And I say at risk because I hate this idea. Are we at risk of becoming a little too close bed partners with NATO again in the U.S.? And God forbid, maybe even talking about Ukraine entering into NATO?
Well, Trump has a very strange relationship with NATO in both now and in the first term. While you're correct that Trump sort of campaigned on flirting with fundamentally renegotiating or even leaving parts of the NATO relationship, even during Trump 1, he was campaigning on getting more money to NATO. He was campaigning on getting all the countries to fulfill their 2% GDP commitments. And so even though he was sort of campaigning on it and tried to pressure NATO to reduce its jurisdictional mandate, he was still pumping it up financially. And you see that same sort of continuation in the relationship today, where he's still calling, it appears publicly, and there's always a little bit of 4D chess to what Trump is doing, but publicly it does appear that he is sort of reining in NATO maximalism vis-a-vis Ukraine, which I think is part of why he had a one-off separate discussion with Putin. But at the same time, he's pressuring NATO member countries to pay more and more to NATO. So it's sort of arming a beast and putting it on steroids while telling it to stay in the house. Yeah. So it's a very strange relationship.
Yeah, Mike. I want to hold you over because there's a very important question. Steve Witkoff was on with Margaret Brennan on CBS, on the Sunday show CBS, and he said that the U.S. has offered Article 5-like security protections for Ukraine. Really caught my ear when I heard that, and let's talk about the implications of that when we come right back. Mike, before the break, I teased a little question because I was stunned when I heard Steve Witkoff offer this, and I guess we've offered this to I guess Trump told Putin that we were offering this to Ukraine, and he called it an Article 5-like security protections for Ukraine. with the U.S. oversight. In other words, we, not NATO, we, U.S., is going to make sure. Article 5 basically says anyone in NATO is attacked, all of NATO has to defend that member country. Ukraine's not a member country. How do you read that, Mike?
It's an interesting gambit. So essentially, the way this is designed to be structured is that there would be some land granted to Russia in this trade, but that Russia could take no more land without triggering Article 5. So this would likely involve giving, it's a strange thing to say, but giving Crimea to Russia. Obviously, Crimea voted in a democratic referendum to join the Russian Federation, but the EU and NATO do not respect that referendum. But essentially, if NATO were to leave Russia-controlled Crimea alone, and whatever swaths of land in eastern Ukraine Russia is given in the peace, that they would essentially hold a kind of line of demarcation there that would, in theory, prevent Russia from taking any more land while guaranteeing Russia the land that it won in the peace deal. That's, I think, sort of the design of this. Now, what's interesting is Russia is not in NATO, obviously. It does not have a veto vote. There's nothing to stop NATO from deciding, US and NATO deciding to agree to do this anyway without Putin's consent. So this is very clearly designed to be a kind of inducement for Russia to agree to peace terms. But from Putin's perspective, I think it's difficult to trust that there will not be a kind of forever war inside of Crimea, color revolutions like were done in Ukraine in 2004 and 2014, inside of Crimea, inside of eastern Ukraine in what would be Russia-controlled territory. So I think all parties are rightly wary of each other, but this is the sort of thing that I think if Trump really wanted to do this, he could do this without Putin's consent.
Mm-hmm. Mike, a very pedestrian question here, and just an observer from the outside, you're much more in tune to this. It strikes me that big bad Russia, they may have the most nukes on the planet, big military presence, can't even accomplish, right or wrong, Putin's goal of taking Ukraine. It's what are we, 3 years on plus, and it strikes me that are we in a situation in the world right now where these big threats from Russia, North Korea, Iran don't hold the teeth, and we shouldn't be as fearful of these things going forward?
Well, it's tough to say. I think both sides have been holding back on the heaviest of weaponry for the past several years. I mean, there have been discussions of things like tactical nuclear weapons, smaller scale ones, and the like. But mostly this has been a drone war for the past 2 years after the initial bodies were chewed up in year one. But this has never been Russia versus Ukraine. This has always been Russia versus NATO, which is what also makes the Article 5 language kind of an interesting gambit, but again, a strange one.
Well, the odd thing, Mike, is he didn't say NATO. He called it Article 5 like, with the United States being the peacekeeper in this. Like we're going to put U.S. boots on the ground on the whatever this new border would be between Ukraine, what's left of Ukraine and Russia. Very quick, I only have about half a minute.
It's been American weapons. It's been American special advisors and trainers. It's been the Brits, the Canadians, the Poles, the Germans, the French. I mean, this has been we're acting like there has been an Article 5 violation already. So to simply call it an Article 5 like protection is really not all that different from the terms of the war as they currently are.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Mike Benz, always good to have you. Executive Director, Foundation for Freedom Online. What a smart guy. Good to have you on, Mike. Thank you.